With the final shape, Bungie made a ton of changes to the Stasis subclass, but they also gave us a brand new subclass, Prismatic, that combines elements from all the other subclasses, including Stasis. Now the question needs to be asked, since we have Prismatic, is it even worth playing Stasis at all? Let me start off by saying that I don't think that every subclass and build needs to be able to solo dungeons, do master raids, or complete other sweaty shenanigans. But what every subclass should have, and how we'll be judging them in this video, is uniqueness and power. Specifically, Stasis should do Stasis stuff better than Prismatic, and that Stasis stuff should be relatively good. I don't think that's a whole lot to ask. Now, let's take a look at Stasis, starting with Warlocks. Warlock Stasis is all about control of the battlefield, and no aspect does that better than Bleak Watcher. This allows us to turn our Stasis Grenade into a sentient Stasis turret that slows and freezes enemies. And when we combine this with the Osmiomancy gloves, and put on Cold Snap Grenades, we can have 2 turrets up at all times. I ran this build in Lost Sectors and multiple Grandmaster Nightfalls, and it is excellent at controlling large numbers of enemies. But here's the thing, Prismatic Warlock has access to Bleak Watcher too, and while I love the Ice Flare Bolts aspect on Stasis, I didn't really miss it when I swapped subclasses. And Prismatic Warlock also has access to some fantastic secondary aspects that boost your survivability, like Feed the Void, which gives us health on kills and even more grenade energy. And the aspect Facet of Ruin that causes the shatter from frozen enemies to be bigger and do more damage. And let's not forget about the Transcendence ability that combines Stasis and Void to slow and damage enemies trapped inside. When you put all that together, Prismatic isn't just doing Stasis, it's doing Stasis better than the Stasis subclass. Prismatic 1, Stasis 0. Let's move on to Hunters. Stasis Hunter has always been a bit of a dark horse in PvE to me. The whole kit seems much more geared toward PvP, but if there's a play in PvE, I think I found it. Stasis Hunter is about embracing your inner Frost Demon. Abilities are mainly meant to distract, slow, and direct combat. Aspects like Winter Shroud are more evasive in nature, and Shatter Dive is really like a cool finisher on enemies dumb enough to push you. And perhaps the king of this is, no, not those, is this forgotten exotic helmet, the Mask of Bakris. Bakris turns our dodge into a teleport, hence building into the distraction. And every time we dodge, we get a 25% weapon surge to our stasis and arc weapons. Running mono stasis on Hunter was incredibly fun. I was able to play crowd control, aggressively push, and then just vanish before too much aggro headed my way. Don't get me wrong, it's not Still Hunt Celestial Nighthawk, but the flavor and power was on point. When I swapped over to Prismatic, I was less impressed. I could still use some of the stasis aspects like Winter Shroud and Stylish Executioner that made me go invisible when killing debuffed enemies, but most of the time it was totally counter to my exotic, which wanted me to use my weapons, thus making me visible again. And you could swap to Renewal Grasps on Prismatic, but I had zero interest in running it without Touch of Winter. Overall, Prismatic Stasis came off as weaker and much more restrictive than the mono subclass, which, by the way, is perfect. Prismatic 1, Mono Stasis 1. Now before we get to Titans, if you're finding this video interesting, take a second to hit the like button and subscribe to keep up to date on videos we have coming in the future. Okay, Titans. Stasis Titan is all about freezing and then breaking enemies, preferably with your fist. All the aspects and fragments are geared toward up-close combat, and that has historically gone just about as well as eating late-night gas station sushi. The problem has always been easy to identify: survivability. There simply wasn't enough in the kit to keep you alive fighting at point-blank range. But then Bungie added the new keyword Frost Armor, which grants damage resistance scaling from 4.5% at 1 stack to 36% at max stacks with the Whisper of Rime equipped, theoretically making our Angry Yeti much tankier. I made the decision to lean into the Diamond Lance aspect to add more ways to freeze enemies, and because those got a big buff. I paired it with the Cadmus Ridge Lance Cap for better stasis lances, and so I could generate a stasis lance just by shooting my stasis weapon and standing behind a rally barricade. Stasis Titan was actually pretty fun, and with the Harvest aspect equipped, I sat at max stacks of frost armor for the majority of fights. But then I swapped to Prismatic, and the amount of freezing, shattering action just became unreal. Mind you, I didn't even have the knockout aspect equipped, which would have massively increased my survivability. Running a Glacier Grenade, Diamond Lances, Behemoth Super, and adding in a ranged shatter from Consecration turned master level enemy strongholds into alien graveyards in mere seconds. And while I lost most of the damage resistance for frost armor, I did get the 15% from Facet of Protection, and I cannot stress this enough. Nothing was left alive to shoot me. While not the most powerful version of Prismatic Titan, that still belongs to Knockout Consecration, this build did stasis, except much more effectively than the mono subclass. Final count, Prismatic 2, Stasis 1. So, should you play Stasis over Prismatic? No. But what's the problem, and what should Bungie do next? Let me offer a few thoughts, and understand I'm not a game dev. First, Prismatic Warlock far outstrips its mono counterpart, especially because of its offense. But that's not completely the fault of the subclass. Stasis is designed for unparalleled control, but you know what's better than controlling an enemy? Killing it. In almost all Destiny activities, a good offense is better than a good defense. But that's probably a larger issue with difficulty than a simple tweak to subclasses. Hunter overall is in a good place. I do think the subclass could benefit from some buffs to weapon damage, or maybe give hunters like the ability to slow, like a chill clip, with their stasis weapons for a few seconds. Maybe they have to pick up an orb or something. But don't get me wrong, you can make plays on monostasis that are just not as good on Prismatic. Absolutely unique and powerful way to play. Lastly, for Titans, the issue is much simpler than Warlocks. They need better sustainability. Frost Armor currently gives a stacking damage resistance up to 36%, and that might seem like a lot, but in order to get the max benefit, you need to create multiple shards and go collect them, and if you get max stacks, your damage resistance barely beats out Woven Mail. And as a side note, you can get Woven Mail on Strand by equipping one fragment and picking up one, yes, one, Orb of Power. It's so much easier, and is one reason that you've probably seen several Prismatic Titan builds recommend the Blade Fury Super alongside the Facet of Purpose. If Stasis Titan is ever going to compete with Prismatic, Frost Armor is going to have to be a lot stronger. And by that, I mean giving Titans a way to build stacks faster, or significantly increase the DR at max stacks to make the effort and power fantasy feel relevant and unrivaled by its Prismatic counterpart. That's how I see it. What do you think about Stasis and Prismatic? Let's talk about it in the comments. And if this video gets 200 likes, we'll test out another subclass versus Prismatic.